Greetings. I hope that you're doing really well and that you're practicing radical self-care. I hope you're doing meditation, hopefully getting some trauma therapy or working with a coach. I hope that you are getting plenty of exercise, surrounding yourself with kind, good, loving, authentic people. In this video, what I'm going to talk about is some of the signs that you might be experiencing or have experienced narcissistic abuse, and some of the signs of trauma and complex PTSD that you have perhaps during the relationship and also after. So we know about NPD that there's the 3 E's. They have impairment of their empathy, they are entitled, and they are exploitative, right? And with the covert narcissists, this can be very hidden, right? So it's it's hidden abuse, especially with the coverts, where the world doesn't see it. It's only the recipient. And even then, even the person who's being abused, they might not even realize they're being abused, because they might associate abuse with like physical abuse or verbal abuse. And they may not associate abuse with gaslighting. They may not know they're being gaslit, right? Stonewalling, passive aggressive communication, punishing, manipulation, lying, cheating, all these things. Like, they may not know this is happening because it's under the radar. The narcissists are very good at being duplicitous and duping people, right? So especially the really high level covert or sociopathic types. Watch the mini series on Ted Bundy. He was a narcissist and a psychopath. Not all narcissists are psychopaths, but he was. And he was he did a lot of compartmentalization. He was able to be in a relationship with a woman and her child for like 7 years, and he would have dinner with the woman. He would take, he taught the little girl how to tie her shoelace. He was like a very good boyfriend, and then he would go butcher women. And he kept these things very separate. It was very compartmentalized. So I'm not saying that all narcissists are Ted Bundys. I'm just saying, if you want an idea of how they are able to compartmentalize, I would say take a look at that series. But we know that, they have low empathy, they have this grandiose or inflated sense of self. The cerebral narcissists think that they're just the biggest geniuses on the planet and everyone else is an idiot minion. They have an extreme need for admiration and attention, and they are addicted to feeling special, and they need to feel superior to everyone around them. Of course, with the covert narcissists, especially the covert sort of neglectful parasitic narcissists, they may actually even say things that are sort of self-depreciating to get somebody to go, oh, no, you're not that. You're amazing. You're brilliant. They can be very manipulative in that way. But so some of the signs, well, one is when you first got in the relationship with them, they seem so perfect at first. And you might have said to yourself, wow, this feels too good to be true, because it is. That's during the idealization phase, and they mirror their targets, right? They mirror the person that their new source of supply, they mirror them. Which is why also during the discard, if you're in a relationship with one and they start acting really weird and dressing differently and talking differently and just acting differently, that is probably because they're mirroring the new source of supply. They're still trying to keep you on the hook, but they're sort of schizophrenic. They can't, mirror you and the new source of supply as effectively, right? So in the beginning of these relationships, there's love bombing. They can seem to be the most generous, kind, loving, or, considerate, adoring partners. They have you on a pedestal. They idealize you. You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel understood. Maybe even for the first time, you feel more understood and seen and cared for than you ever have before. This is particularly compelling to people that have childhood trauma and they have a little bit of a hole inside that's like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. So it can be very compelling to be love bombed by a narcissist who's telling you everything that you ever wanted to hear from a person, right? So it can be very compelling. Problem is it's fake. It is BS, right? That early stage is very intense. It can be very overwhelming. It may be overly fantastic, and there may be incredible declarations of love, that you're their soulmate. It's love at first sight. They may be getting you gifts. They may be sort of almost obsessed with you, coming over all the time, lots of communication. They adore you. They praise you. They're just putting you up on a pedestal, right? But then the devaluation starts. And if it's a covert, it can be slow, subtle, and over time. Overts, it can be a little bit more drastic, but we're talking about silent treatment, gaslighting, stonewalling, manipulation. Typically, they're cheating during this time or engaging in a porn addiction. Not always, but and they start to devalue you, and they're superior, you're inferior. They are they are perfect, you are the flawed minion. And no matter what you do, you cannot earn their approval. And you're always trying to go back to that initial idealization phase because it felt so great and you thought it was real. And so you're like, you're like, what did I do wrong to even know what happened? You don't even know what happened because, my darlings, it actually isn't about you. What happened had nothing to do with you. It has to do with their disorder, right? But a lot of times we have a hard time with that. So believing that. So you might, during the devaluation phase, you are probably going to start feeling very confused. You're going to feel very upset, like you're walking on eggshells, like you're not secure in the relationship. You feel very insecure. They may be playing games like commitment games where they're not really committing. They're kind of wishy-washy. You don't know what's happening. You feel like you can't make any mistakes. You have to be sort of perfect. So you're constantly walking on eggshells around these people. And it may not be because they're overts. Like overts actually are very rageful verbally often. And so you might be walking on eggshells, not knowing what's going to set them off. But with covert, it could be that you're walking on eggshells because you don't want to get the silent treatment or the punishing. And you may not even be consciously aware of this fact, but subconsciously, if you're an empath codependent, if you're very attuned to other people's feelings, you might feel that there's this there's a danger if you sort of assert yourself or try to get your needs met, right? Because remember, when you're asking a narcissist to meet your needs, they take that as a personal insult, which is really weird, but they do. And you could just be like, look, I'm just asking you for my needs to be met. For them, that's an insult and a criticism. Because remember, they're very sensitive to criticism, perceived or real. Remember, it could be perceived criticism, which they perceive a lot of things as criticism. So if you're starting to feel this where you just can't, no matter what you do, you feel like you're not good enough. No matter what you do, you can't please them. No matter what you do, you meet the bar that they've set and then they move it, and then you meet it and then they move it. So it's like the bar's always moving. You can never please these people. You might respond to abuse in different ways. Some people freeze. The freeze response, where you feel helpless, you might disassociate, you may emotionally distance yourself, you might feel numb, you might feel depressed, you might feel like it's difficult for you to do things that used to be easy for you. You feel like you start losing your motivation. That can happen. And then another thing that you might be experiencing is a problem. You might have trouble making decisions. This pattern of devaluation and criticism can really erode your self-esteem and confidence, especially when it's coming from the person who's supposed to love you more than anyone in the world, right? Where you're being subtly devalued and you feel like, you're the idiot in the relationship. They're superior, you're inferior, you're dumb, they're perfect. And remember, during the idealization, especially with the cerebral narcissists, they may have said you are a genius, you're so smart, you're their intellectual equal, right? Internally, they don't think that because they think all 7.5 billion people on the planet are their intellectual inferiors, right? They think that. But they may have said, oh, you're so smart, you're so blah, 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 right? So during this time, you might start developing trouble making decisions, trouble trusting yourself. Gaslighting is so bad for the brain. It's so bad for your nervous system. You do not trust yourself. You get in these relationships and you get to a point where you only trust the narcissist. You trust them to be the purveyor of information, right? And they are very untrustworthy. But that's what gaslighting does to you. Gaslighting is systematically trying to get another person to question their reality and sanity. That is a horrible thing to do to another person. And if you're like an empath or codependent, you don't even know how to do that. You literally have no idea. It's not in your wheelhouse, right? But narcissists use gaslighting. I didn't say that. That's not what I said. That wasn't my intention. That's not what happened. You're remembering incorrectly. You must have forgot. Those are the kind of manipulations. Or sometimes they'll even do weird stuff like this. Like, this is a real example. You lose your wallet. You think you lose it at the grocery store. You tell the narcissist. The narcissist comes with you to the grocery store and searches the whole parking lot in the grocery store to try to find your wallet. Meanwhile, the narcissist had actually taken your wallet to make copies of your credit cards because the narcissist was planning the discard and the divorce and you didn't know it. No idea, right? So you're searching frantically in the parking lot with the narcissist. The next day, you walk out. There's your purse, your little wallet, right on the way to your car, but you're pretty sure and you know it actually wasn't there. So that's a real example of like how crazy they are. Gaslighting. Another gaslighting example was a couple weeks before finding out about the long-term affair with a married lady at work with 3 kids. The narcissist is telling you that you're jealous and insecure and that's the problem in the relationship. That's the only thing they're actually saying is a problem. And you're like, okay, so you take all these classes and you're trying to work on your jealousy and insecurity. And there's a portion in one of the courses where you're supposed to ask your partner to help you, with your jealousy and insecurity problem by listening to this whole podcast for a couple of hours, this portion of the course. The narcissist sits down on the couch, spends 2 hours listening to the course to help you with your jealousy and insecurity problem. Meanwhile, they had just come back from having sex with their new source of supply, their affair partner. True story. That's gaslighting. So with narcissists, you feel like you've always done something wrong, like you can't quite hit the mark, like you don't know what it is that they want and you're confused. And, you might end up apologizing a lot. You're the one who's always apologizing. Most narcissists do not apologize. The only time they do is if they're trying to get you to not leave them. Maybe some will, but sometimes some will just never apologize for anything, because why would they need to apologize? They're perfect, right? It's very hard for their ego to apologize, right? And it's certainly not a sincere apology. You might spend 10 years with someone and never get an apology. That was the true story. So this is some other physical symptoms that you might experience. Appetite changes, upset stomach or nausea. You might start having gastrointestinal distress. You might have IBS. You might start having muscle pains and aches. You might struggle with fatigue, foggy brain, insomnia. Some of the people who are in these relationships start using alcohol, other substances, or behavioral addictions to try to cope with the abuse that they're enduring, and usually they don't even know they're enduring. Narcissistic abuse can sometimes be quite unpredictable. Remember, there's this abuse cycle of it's called intermittent reinforcement or operant conditioning, and it is love bombing, which could be in the form of ski trips, climbing trips, right? Love bombing, and then devaluation, right? Or abuse. So love bombing, abuse, and you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes the abuse is in the form of stonewalling, silent treatment, insincere communication, ignoring you, not giving you any validation, withholding sex, money, intimacy, information, controlling finances, controlling time, controlling things, right? So love bombing and then devaluation, love bombing and abuse. You never know what you're going to get. The narcissist will breadcrumb you. They will manage you down to where they're giving tiny little bits, crumbs, and you're doing more and more and more to get less and less and less. That is a very efficient strategy if you think about it. Narcissists are kind of genius in that way. But you don't even know what's happening. All you know is you're working your ass off to try to make this relationship work. Well, the narcissist is basically doing nothing. They're breadcrumbing. So they get you so accustomed to abuse that you will accept almost anything from them, which is very, very difficult. You might find yourself having trouble setting boundaries. These people do have little respect for boundaries. They're going to challenge them. They're going to ignore them. They're going to agree to your face and then manipulate and not respect them behind your back. They're going to give you the silent treatment. They're going to stonewall. Eventually, you might just give up on even trying to have boundaries. These people have no respect for boundaries. Anxiety and depression. This is very common as a result of narcissistic abuse. Feeling restless, nervous, worry, fear, sometimes paranoia or terror. You might feel hopeless, worthless. You lose interest in all the things that you used to love. You might have a lot of confusion and foggy brain, like you just can't make sense of things. You might have your self-esteem is getting eroded little by little by little, and you don't a lot of times even know it's happening. You're feeling like you're not yourself. And this kind of abuse can take a significant toll on your emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. You might be having, hypervigilance, anxiety, easily startled, insomnia, like all of these symptoms from narcissistic abuse. And I know that it's very, very difficult. And I also recognize that, unfortunately, society will often invalidate our experience of abuse because it's very hard for them to understand. If you have not personally experienced this type of abuse, it can be very difficult for you to wrap your head around it, or for you to even realize that you're being abused, especially if you associate abuse with physical and verbal abuse, but you are with somebody who's giving you strictly, mostly like psychological and emotional abuse, somebody who's gaslighting you, somebody who is manipulating you, somebody who's cheating on you, somebody who's lying to your face, somebody who is stonewalling, somebody who is giving you the silent treatment, intermittent reinforcement, radio silence. When everyone else is giving you compliments for some achievement that you made, they give you radio silence, right? Could be withholding of sex, emotional intimacy, positive reinforcement or validation. The only thing that they do is performative, so other people can see that they're such a nice guy or nice girl, but the abuse is very hidden and subtle, and they leave, they have this thing called plausible deniability because they're so crafty and careful about keeping this abuse hidden and under the radar, that when it's happening, nobody can see it, right? So that's also very frustrating for victims because nobody can see the abuse. People think that this person is such a nice guy or nice girl, especially if you're dealing with the coverts. So again, I totally feel for you if you're experiencing any of these symptoms. I recognize that they are all part of this horrific process, but there is help for you. Definitely, I think trauma therapy, and get a narcissistic abuse coach. If you're interested in private coaching with me, please go to www.coachcat.org, or get a narcissistic abuse coach. Start reading the material, start getting some healing. Look at your potential. If you have some codependent symptoms, look at your codependence or your attachment issues, and really start working on this stuff and getting some incredible healing and positive self-regard, and start building your self-esteem up little by little by little. It's amazing what can happen when you start to take control of your healing and take control of your own growth, and you're no longer going to let this toxic, abusive, manipulative person have any rent space in your head. So I hope you guys are doing great. I hope you're having a great day and you're practicing radical self-care. Thanks so much, and talk to you soon. Bye.